Welcome to the virtual version of our 5th annual event, celebrating the launch of Artemis Journal. The Taubman Museum of Art is especially excited about this year's cover artist, Dorothy Gillespie, who we're currently celebrating in the galleries with the exhibitions Celestial Centennial, The Art and Legacy of Dorothy Gillespie, on view through September 13th, and Dorothy Gillespie, Still Enchanting Virginia's Blue Ridge, on view through November 8th. This year, we have poet, novelist, translator, essayist, and even sometimes short fiction writer Jeanne Larsen as our esteemed keynote. And of course, we welcome back photographer, women's advocate, champion of literature and visual arts, Jeri Rogers, also the founder and editor of Artemis. I'm Stephanie Fallon, education manager here at the Taubman Museum of Art, and I'll be moderating our conversation here in the galleries with the work of Dorothy Gillespie around us.
All right, I wanted to start with a poem that appeared in Artemis in 1988 called Spring Snow. We wake to spring snow in clumps on the pear boughs, strewn thin by the pasture, small drifts banked by flowers we thought had sprung up with the pulse of new days. But this morning, the first of days long as nights, broke cloud-muffled, white. You stir restless. I slip out in blue jeans and barefoot to dance like a crumpled fool over the yard, to brush flakes from the bells, bulbs we planted last fall in a blizzard of quarrels, buried under and parched. Winter was dry. At the reservoir, stumps and foundation stones show unreconciled on the wind-driven tide, laced today on their north sides with waters of ice. I stand too long thinking this, clamber up in the oldest pear, chafe my feet back to red. Oh, what stinging, like love's secret barbed dart that surprised, caught me up out of season, gasping and tumbled deep down where blooms I'd forgotten swelled, budded white, and amid sharp leaves rose. That's very much a Roanoke poem. That is Carvin's Cove, that reservoir. The house there was on the Hollins campus. And the poem is about my husband. Our anniversary is coming very soon, 43 years, still dancing. The next poem I'd like to read is from 2018. They're all so beautiful, but isn't this one? I'm going to read it, though, not the Artemis version, but one with a few words tweaked from What Penelope Chooses, my 2019 book of poems. This is a poem, very briefly in the Odyssey, we learn about Kitmene, who was Odysseus's sister. And the only thing we know about her in a line or two is she got married off. Well, I thought about the voices of women that we don't know, which again is at the heart of Artemis's mission. I think all you need to know is I like to call my sister-in-law Sissy-La, so I gave that to Kitmene. And there is a real fungus called a porcelain fungus that might be growing somewhere on the peninsula that we now call Greece, where Kitmene was living after she left her island home. The first line of this poem is also its title. Shoved out of his story and pissed to the gills, Kitmene carves her muffled arm precisely, sucks down more wine. Ebb high recalls Eumaeus, almost another brother, how much Mama loved him, how he too on Odysseus fawned. Married off high-priced, she's had nights for years in husband's inland bed. It isn't not unpleasant. She makes her think of Sissy-La, pushing 40 sexier than at dumpy 17. What happens when himself, rotated home, finds her in the feast hall? Not Kitmene's problem. Numbed, stumbling through peaceless hills, she sees on a dead beach porcelain fungus glowing. Once she had an island. Her mouth's sheath opens. She hisses. this light, the waves at Ithaca unfolding. So we think about her sister-in-law, Penelope, a great maker of art, as well as an intrepid woman, but there are other women as well. So the next poem is from this issue. It's a lovely cover. This is number 10, 1987. Like a lot of poems, particularly when my life was even busier, until I made myself stop, the speaker of this poem is in her car driving somewhere on Interstate 81 because it's her time of quiet. November, driving home to the Blue Ridge. Late, we travel the rain-thick roads for hours, passing dark towns and the few wide-porched houses where light still gathers. Patches of fog muffle the headlamps. On a country curve, one beam slices into a stand of stripped beeches or oaks. Behind us are friends who no longer love one another. Their children ran loud with sorrow. Each room of their house lay claim to us, whispering, "Listen, he did this," or "How could it happen? I kept them warm." By the end of the evening, the front had moved in. Rain soaked their valley. We saw on the map how it covered the state, how we'd have to drive home in it, how it might last all night. And we too carry our own griefs with us on these roads through the Piedmont, an autumn of distances, angers left in the end to silence, scattered, half-lighted mists of possible lovers. Now, this could be sleet, you say as you downshift. I murmur agreement. We drive on toward home, surrounded by rain. Well, in the epic year 2000, Artemis came out in this wonderful format and kindly included a poem of mine where that was 20 years ago, pretty early in my time of interest in using the first line of the poem for a title. This is also a poem that works much better on the page. You'll see there's a pun. It starts then, "This poem will vanish line following line as you read it, the still chime of gone bell ring, flat gleam after ripples. This poem is a scroll unwinding and wound again in dark corridors, coils. This poem as you grasp it is slick optics, is electrons excited, beamed invisible ink, is tink or clank, fully real as tink or clank, is encrypted in memory where all things must rot. This poem is finally no more as you present tense read it as you past tense read." Now on the page, you might be able to see that this long, skinny poem is a word count poem. And it's exercises like that. I'll write a poem where every line has 3 words that can help push you if you're looking for a thing to get yourself going right now. The way I think Gillespie must have clearly set herself all kinds of problems. Well, I'll read this poem for my good friend Jeri Rogers, the woman who's carried Artemis all these decades, because she said she liked it. This goes back to 1986. And I'm actually in the person described in the poem is back in her house on the Hollins University campus, Hollins College it was then. I think we all know Pachelbel's Canon, so you might play that over-familiar but lovely music in your head. This poem is Forcing Flowers. Winter yields up one day. The woman walks out, but not past the yard, willing her skin to feel only sunlight on cotton and not the chill wind. After months of resentment, sleets of self-pity, stale airs in the house, she takes shears, and the blade's silver gladdens her. Indoors, the man broods by the radio, missiles approved, a coma months long, murderous factories, chemical clouds. They bear it, of course. Where they live, it is green, the poison's invisible. Orchards will bloom in 3 weeks, whatever the world does. She's impatient as always. Forsythia, quince, she won't cut the wan pear buds, but these she can have. She took some last month, tracking She took some last month, tracking cold through soft snow. And what came of it? Sparse, yellow-bleached flowers, the stench of weak rootlets rotting at birth, and for quince's hot rose, blooms pallid as cave fish, like a child born too soon and kept in glass cradles till its season should come. She shrugs. In the shine, a few leaves acquiesce. He flings open the window. Pachelbel chimes, too sweet, too familiar. He calls out her name, yells, "Fill all the vases." She turns, shows him her arms load, thinks, now I know what it means to say crazy with joy. I'm so glad Jeri asked for that, because that's a poem that I think tells us something about getting through the pandemic, about how we can find, in a time of misery, in a time of reckoning, we can find joy and we can fill all the vases in whatever way we are able to. I wanted to read this poem. Oh, isn't this a spiffy cover? 1990. It looks like a 1990 cover. I really like it. This is a kind of sonnet, and when I was working through my last book of poems, I had quite a few formless poems about the Odyssey. And when I thought, I'm going to make them 14-liners and call them sonnets, and they were falling into iambics anyway, it did a lot for the poems. Take my word for it. And so it's a pleasant surprise to be reminded that I did do a sonnet or two long ago, 1990. This one's called Next to the Window, Late in the Year. And I wrote this at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, so not far from here, another place I have a great debt to. I have sat too long at this table, outside, umber, maroon, and gold, the pastures frosted to richness. Weary greens still count the cost of summer, how it asks more than we realize, sitting down to its feast. Now, with rough movement, fall rides like a hunter gasping and fixed on the end. Even the cooling sky wraps, tender, half-yielding, round fence posts, bare stalks. But you, too wise for this idle coupling of things not alike, an ardent season, a table spread, or autumn and lovers, you, all fancy drawn, stay sober. Near drunk I walk out. The wing beats and wild certain cries of geese trouble my ear. I sat at that table too long. Well, there was a party night at VCCA. I know Stephanie and I will be talking about threads through our lives as artists, and I'm seeing it's so wonderful to have this opportunity to look back at my poems over the decades in Artemis and see how I seem to keep writing the same poem over and over. I believe this was my first poem in Artemis. It came out in 1982. Made me so very happy, but then they all have. This is in the days when my deep obsession with Arctic and Antarctic, but in this case Arctic landscapes, was going strong still. It's called Arctic Spring. We have lived through the winter, our bodies survive. They step light round the tussocks, harbored swaddles of feathers, eggs ticking within. They nod to the weasels, homage to black eyes, to belly stripes flash, lemon quick at the strike. These bodies, they're romping. They frolic in sweet hay, fragrance with past blooms, dry tufts of tundra grass, berries winter-bleached leaves, gay lichens and dull. Creek roils free around them, frost clutching its gully, no fixed course displaced. The dun plain goes stamen green, goes grass yellow, casts off, catkin husks rose. The bodies spy foxes, sniff out their lairs, and heedless leap over leads that slice through the lake ice and coil round the shore. Duels. A squaw duck goes under, lost to his rival, breeze water and sinks. They see this. The ptarmigan croon, catch me, ah, catch me, glancing back at their mates. Oh, the bodies are singing, drunk with colors and love wars, consumed by spring's incense, death's most delicate scent. This poem came out in 2016 in Artemis, and it is one of my many signs of my debt to medieval Chinese poetry. Although I wrote it after a walking trip in Yorkshire, and I might have really had the poems of Jiaoran, a Tang Dynasty monk poet, in my backpack. I might have had the poems of Li Ye in my backpack, or I might have told a lie. Walking up a Yorkshire dale, old Tang monk Jiaoran bagged in plastic on my back with map and rain gear, pen, homesteads along the spring line, a tarn, moorgrass on a heathery fell where years only after Li Ye died, that sexy poet, his friend, a Taoist some called nun, and only years ahead of the Tang's slow plunge. Norse settlers in this land of no time built among their Saxon neighbors, not invaders really, easing in. Geniuses of transformation, the best poets are, said Jiaoran. At River's Bend, Victorian Gothic windows, Norman columns, St. Michael slew a pagan dragon, claimed old holy ground. 10,000 pilgrims in this churchyard lie, scratches in insubstantial earth. Mere traces, Jiaoran wrote, are our daily words and world. Yorkshire's limestone pavements made of lingering forms, sea lilies, corals, creature shells. This road, he said, seeing off a friend, asked, been here how long? Soon I take a mile or two, the Roman highway up this island's spine, mud and pack horse cobbles, lately by quad bikes churned, centurions pursued by yahoos into Hades' murky fountainhead to join stone circle builders, lowland Celts. Let images of objects carry what the poet feels, where grikes within a white mosaic hold, as if encoded, hawthorn, bonsaied hazel, safe from grazing. I call that aim to mind. Call the King of Wu, who stood on deciphered Neolithic commons, rock-walled, mounded, hut-shaped, simultaneous with Song or Yuan. I'm stopped for lunch, where falls grass dries on Chinese karst. Perhaps I'll nap. Like Jiaoran Li Ye, so few poems left, chides, no heading off to holy India. Perhaps I won't move on. First, out of the pack, the moon will rise. Yes, what use travel again? The King of Wu, I'll read, will not. Okay. So I'm going to finish with two poems from What Penelope Chooses. I was so glad to be able to include the poem I read earlier from Artemis. This one comes early in the book, and it speaks to some things that I know we've all been thinking about the responsibility of the artist in times of social change and social need, which is pretty much all times. So you probably know that Homer's a little bit of a mythic figure, but there are old biographies that traditionally have him living in what we now, some of us call Asia Minor, some people call it Turkey, not far from where the ruins that are surely the ruins of the city of Troy actually still stand and have been excavated. And it's also, the Troy itself looked over the Hellespont, that little strait between the Mediterranean into the Black Sea. So it's very easy to imagine Homer passing by the centuries-old heap of destroyed buildings that would have been the city of Troy that later became magnified in his great poems. We've been hearing that phrase, no justice, no peace, lately, and I've been hearing it most of my adult life. I think you will hear an echo of it here. Scamander is the name of the river that flows outside the city of Troy, which ran red with blood, we're told at one point in the Iliad. Homer, could he see it, must have seen how swords can obelisk oiled muscle, how Scamander blood forks to the Hellespont, ships rotting where touchy heroes lived up to 10 years, held whiz-bang funeral games. Leastways, no passer in his day by could, sighted, miss that barrow, the limestone walls not entirely overcome, huts built from palatial rubble, salt swamp maze of siege-crowded, nerve-jumped lower city for centuries drained. Yup, he saw a homing sequel hero, but not bronze, nameless spearmen's nameless wives, spindle whirlers, loving no-name sons as a sea raider loves a wrecked deck's plank. A half-assed history, no images, no justice. He, we, being blind, or might as well. Well, I hope all art encourages us to see. In thinking about this reading and thinking about Artemis, I thought, of course, of the figure of Penelope, who is often described as Odysseus' faithful wife, and indeed she did cover that front too. But it was her weaving and her cleverness that made it possible for there to be a sort of foothold for him when he got back after 20 years to Ithaca and bring it back. So this poem makes us think about her as the weaver. She was Helen of Troy's cousin. And it also lets me show off that I know the word hypogeal, which is the Greek way of saying subterranean, beneath the earth, underneath, on that deep place where art works on us. Remember, when Odysseus comes home, he's disguised as a scroungy beggar, a person of low social class, not for a lady like Penelope, and yet there's something between them, and the story dances around her half recognition of him. Certainly she recognizes him, or uncertainly, or not, or it's hypogeal. Odysseus we parse like a string. He is the wild card character embedded this trophy queen. Some things she loved. A bleached cockle shell screwed up prettier cousin Helen sent. Those earrings, clusters beckoning mulberry style. A lustrous bowl where ebony fish circle, feathery geese. Life was courtyard walls, a stairway, musty silences, the wait for the disturbing aporic drifter. She did not love the wool, wool, wool. Weaving built her only city wall, her loom a tall-masted ship. A few more centuries, and she'd have played the goddamn lyre. She'd sing, no, here's what happened. She must have been just furious. Thank you for listening.
Great. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here with our 2020 launch of Artemis Journal. This is the beautiful edition of this year. And thank you, Jeanne, so much for that beautiful reading. I had no idea that you had such a long history with Artemis.
Yes, it's been wonderful, for me at least, because Artemis has been such a kind of solid thread through arts in the Roanoke Valley and beyond. And we counted. Recently, Jeri and I coded up, and I have had poems in there 14 times, and a story once. So I love Artemis. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, wow. And so Artemis has been around since 1977.
Yes, we started in the basement of the YWCA here at the Women's Resource Center. I was hired to be the director, and the only way I would accept the position is if they let me bring in my love of art into the position and use it in counseling. So that's how that started.
Yes, and you also ran writing workshops.
Yes, the counseling center dealt with women of all ages and many problems, but a lot of the problems were abuse. And of course, with abuse, you have alcohol and drug related and, rent problems and joblessness. So I was fortunate at that time to have met some very talented writers in the Valley through a photography show I had called Season of Women. And these women were professors at Hollins. Some were writing within the Roanoke Valley. And I asked them if they would consider creating writing workshops for the abused women. I just felt like that might be a great tool for them to use to help sort through their problems.
Absolutely. And so this year you chose Dorothy Gillespie for your cover, and I understand that you knew her.
Well, I met her in 1977. I was in my office, and I'm seeing great progress with these writing workshops. And naively, I said, we're going to publish. I had no idea about publishing, but I just felt like this is what we were going to do. And in walks Lynn Yates. You may or may not know Lynn. She's now deceased, but she was a real prominent figure in the art world. She was the first director of the museum on Cherry Hill. She walked in my office. She had heard that we were doing a journal, feminist journal, and she walked in and said, how would you like a cover by Dorothy Gillespie? She was good friends with Dorothy, and somehow she thought this would be great. And I quickly learned who Dorothy was, and I said, terrific, let's go for it. And, it was a really great addition for us. I mean, actually, Dorothy put us on the map because she was already an international star. Even though she was a Roanoke native, she was well known. And so when the business community got wind of Dorothy coming to do the cover, before I knew it, all kinds of excitement was surrounding this journal that was yet to be published, and put a little pressure on me, but I handled it. And, but one thing led to another, and I got to know Dorothy, and she was just a terrific woman. I went up to New York and visited her in her studio and picked out the first cover, which we do have, and that was on a poster. And so that's how it all began.
Wow, she's such a great match for Artemis. She was also a great proponent for women in the arts.
Yes.
And I know that both of you, in your different careers, with Artemis, of course, with the workshops, and then Jeanne, with your illustrious teaching career at Historic Women's College, Hollins University, you've both been women in the arts and worked on behalf of women in the arts. So I'd love, starting with you, Jeanne, to talk a little bit about your experience and also how you think we can uplift women's voices.
Yeah, it does matter to me, Stephanie. It's important, and if we don't do that work, everybody's poorer. So I think one thing that's really important is having women-centered spaces. Might not be necessary in an ideal world, but this one's a little less than perfect. So, like Collins, but also like Artemis. And we need, this is such a 2020 word, we need to listen. And listen means also look deeply at, and it means to read. But it means to notice those voices. I think also, as many of us are thinking more about these days, we need to do some self-examination of how maybe ideas have come into our heads. Oh, Gillespie had a period when she did works on paper. But isn't paper sort of a minor medium? You know, well, that's absurd, of course. But in fact, she celebrated and worked big in paper. So I think we need to push through those biases that have been inculcated in us. And finally, and this is where I have to bow to Jeri, we need to support women. We've all benefited, as I think Gillespie did, from supportive men in our lives in whatever way. But woman-to-woman support means a great deal. And Artemis has been so good for that.
Yes.
Do you have anything to add?
Well, when we began, we were a feminist journal, and I wanted to support the women in the writing workshops, the abused women. And I felt like their voices needed to be heard. I'm a big journalist myself, making journals, and I love the process of keeping journals. And I also was reading Anaïs Nin at the time, and I loved her journals. I just felt like that was going to be a great way to help these women open up, because, you know, often women in those situations can get very isolated. So, you know, for the first 3 years, we were a feminist journal, just women, until we had a man sneak in and change his name from Robert to Roberta. And I think you probably know this person. I swear I'd never talk about him in public like this, but he was published, and in our 4th journal, the people working with me were just freaking out, like, we have a man in our journal? Oh my God. And it was really interesting, but I felt like it was time to evolve, and that there's some really great men out there, and they want to be involved. And so that's how we opened up Artemis to include men. And today we do include men. So, yeah.
So speaking a little bit about themes and topics you've both explored over the years in your work, I'm always curious how you are drawn to these topics. If over the years they tend to feed into one another, or if you're more influenced by moments in time, you know, circumstances that we're living through, how easily blown off trajectory you might be interested in new flashy things, or if you find that you've been pretty steadfast and true over the years. Would you like to?
Sure. Well, for me, it is an interplay of both of those things, the kind of long-term arc that you suggested and what's happening right now, often refracted or diffused in some way. The phrase I thought I would use for myself was kind of sequential obsessions. So I am enormously, unrepaybackably indebted to Chinese literature, especially the poetry of several golden ages. And I think that affected my art. It also gave me material to write some novels and supported things about how I see the natural world. But things change over time. My current obsession is the Homeric world. Homer's Odyssey, particularly, the Iliad's got a lot of blood in it. But I see some of the same, I respond, it's the same person responding, or later edition.
Right, absolutely. So seeing the current events through your familiar lens, maybe, and then your lens being affected.
And whatever it is in me that looks for long ago and far away as a way to go out and then come back into my own life or to my culture and my particular historical moment. And I think it's like the evolution of Artemis in many ways. That it's remained woman-centered in some important ways, even as it opened the door to men who have contributed to the editorial work as well as the material.
And the board of directors, and Eugene were also on our board of directors, I think in the 80s.
That was fun.
We've been through a lot of changes with Artemis, but always my thread have, for whatever reason, I feel very committed to women's work and art. And the first journal was, we titled it Celebration of Women in the Arts with Dorothy Gillespie, but it was all women. You know, it's been my mission, and I love it, and I feel very committed to it because I've seen such good things come from it. And I think women's voices need to be heard. I think, you know, 50%, 52% of the population are women, and I think it often gets drowned out. And even in the art world, it's been male dominated. So we have always been on that track. In fact, talking about the Chinese art theme, I think it was 2014, Women Hold Up Half the Sky, which was really caught a lot of people's attention. We had so many submissions that about, it killed us. We were so, what are we going to do with all this? But it spoke to so many people. And from that, you know, has evolved Season of Women. It's as if we've gone full circle because it's very important today as well as back in the 70s and back in, you know, 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed. I mean, it's, yeah, which we are celebrating this year as well. It's our centennial celebration of the 19th Amendment, as well as Dorothy, who would have been 100 this year. And so it all came together with the Taubman and our publication. We put her on the cover, full circle, going around, and it just has felt perfect.
So we are living in, as many have noted, unprecedented times with pandemic, with worldwide protests for racial justice. I'd love to hear, starting with you, Jeri, how do you feel these conversations might affect the journal in the future?
Well, you know, artists and writers are always so reflective and produce work that reflects the times. And we keep thinking about next year's journal and what the theme would be. But I do believe this has caused many of us to stop and reflect on how our world was going. And maybe there's some significant changes that need to be made. Obviously, we're already making changes by having lots of virtual appearances and Zoom meetings, and, you know, we're traveling less. So I think it'll be a really good journal next year when we decide on that topic, the theme, but I think it will be in these times.
And so for you, Jeanne, as a writer, how do you feel called to answer these conversations and questions?
We absolutely have to. I knew that question was coming, so I have to brag. I had a strange experience getting ready for a reading a few weeks ago online. And I was looking through the book of poems that riff off of the Odyssey and the Iliad that came out in 2019. And one of the poems has the word pandemic in it. Well, it's a common enough word, but why was I drawn to that? I was talking with Jeri a little while ago and saying, I've been predicting for years we were going to have a terrible pandemic, and it would be so much better for the planet if we did. I do apologize. And of course, I didn't want the pain that we're going through, and I didn't want not just my minor discomfort, but the very real suffering. And yet, there was something in that openness to experience that art calls on us to have that I suppose got me thinking about it. The same way there have been other terrible times. And I think art, like history, reminds us of that. There's something called the Bronze Age collapse that is in the background historically of the Odyssey and the Iliad as we know them. And it was a terrible thing, whether it was really one event or not is argued about by the historians. But things got very bad in terms of disease and invasion and political strife. There have been many uprisings for more justice. They will continue to happen. So we can't not engage. And we owe it to ourselves as artists. And if we can support that in other people with our art, all to the good.
So speaking a little bit off of that, off of your comment about seeing echoes of this in history, does the circumstances that we're in with these conversations, does it feel familiar to you from your lifetime, or does this feel very new?
Oh, you want the old lady to talk about 1968 and 69? Why, yes, it does, and for some years thereafter. Yes, there's a kind of cyclic thing, I think, and the culture kind of contracts, or forces of opposition come down, or we are encouraged to get comfy, and I've been comfy. That's very clear. But I also think this is different. There is a tipping point. Underneath the pandemic, the great need for social change is the climate crisis. And that is an issue that is inextricably linked to social justice and economic justice. There's no doubt about it. So again, if this dreadful pandemic calls our attention to that, if it doesn't become so loud in our ears that we forget how important and how urgent that is, then we've learned from it and gained from it despite the dreadful price.
So I was hoping to close by inviting you both to offer some words of wisdom. During this time of the pandemic, so many of us are experiencing the strange phenomenon of being home a lot more and having quote-unquote time to pursue some creative projects and feeling the call to creativity, but at the same time feeling overwhelmed with anxiety and stress. So I would love for you guys to share, Jeri, if you want to start with some words of wisdom. How do we persevere through the stress and anxiety?
Well, this era is not for the faint of heart, and we will persevere, and we will get through this stronger. And I was just reading about when the 19th Amendment was passed back in 1920. Women back then, the suffragettes, did not play nice. They did not back down. They were thrown into a prison in Morton, Virginia, and force-fed because they went on a hunger strike. I mean, we have had ancestors who have not backed down and have really stayed on the course and keep the vision for a better tomorrow. So we just have to do that. What's the alternative? We don't want the alternative. So that's my advice.
And Jeanne, I know that you've nurtured many a young writer, so you're full of pearls of wisdom to persevere through.
Well, I like what Jeri said. I'll say then, one of my pieces of advice is lower your standards. That is to say, this is a hard time. We are anxious. I think there's a level of tension and stress for all of us that we almost become inured to, we almost forget. And to get beyond that to the place where we can do that playfulness, that is one of the things art is difficult. So think of tricks. Give yourself a project. And maybe, I think haiku are wonderful. I'm not denigrating haiku. But haiku are maybe less intimidating than long poems. And you have the form to play with and play off of. Maybe if you're a writer, you're writing right now, is keeping a journal. I'm not doing it, but I hope other people are. Maybe it's, for visual artists, it's just focusing on your sketch. I'm very lucky in many ways. One of them is I have some old manuscripts to work over, and that is my current work, rather than starting something. I think you also have to tell yourself that fallow time is good. And when you are busy with life's other demands, that you go fallow and you let that come in. It is a part of the process. I can go on with advice. One is ask yourself what you're willing to give up. And that is hard. I would like to have had more dinner parties. I would like to have had dinner parties when I was working and writing, and I didn't do it. So something does go, and don't beat yourself up. Maybe you can find another way through it. And then I thought, well, what Jeri was saying really was important about attitude, and that somehow we have to acknowledge the sadness and the fear. But we also have to laugh. It's going to get better. We're going to get through it. Many decades did it take to get the 19th Amendment passed? That was not one woman's work or one half generation of women's work. How long has the struggle for something beginning to look like racial justice taken? So it will change. Some things will be worse, some will be better. And we will keep slogging on and making our art.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for coming today to celebrate the 2020 edition of Artemis Journal.
Thank you for having us. We've enjoyed it.
This is Sandra de Helen, lesbian poet, playwright, and sometimes novelist, reading my poem Venn Diagram, which is published in the 2020 issue of Artemis Journal. Immigrant children screaming in cages, oil tankers blowing up, states denying women the choice of abortion or even birth control, so-called leaders calling for the death of LGBTQ people, wildfires burning at record rates. That's one circle. All the colors of the rainbow, the peace that nature offers, people resisting in record numbers, young people running for office, puppies, kittens, baby goats, friends and family stepping up. That's another circle. Where they meet is the Venn diagram, where the flames of resistance gather to burn down the patriarchy, where hope lives, hope that we will outlive these times and reign in peace as we build a new world.
This is Lou Gallo, professor of English at Radford University for the last 2 centuries, reading The Goddess Descends in Artemis 2020 in lieu of personal appearance because of coronavirus. The Goddess Descends. She is not, as we hoped, beautiful. The passage left her haggard, knotty, thick with remorse. Her plain face inspires no poets, causes no wars, keeps her off prime time. The ratty jeans and sweatshirt dismay our ladies of influence who have arranged a tea. Their dashing, muscular sons turn away indifferently to shot put, medicine balls, and girls in cashmere sweaters that change history. We are polite, deferential. Fire in the sky should mean something. We take our phones off the hook, draw shades, hope the world shrieks, rages. Anything to ease our desuetude. We want money and love, a cure for cancer, the end of time. But not a single rock has risen since her arrival. Like the deep stern sadness in the faces of granite lions guarding our empty pavilion, we assume she too has some purpose. We make no waves, remain civil, continue to sacrifice one another with proper repentance. We cannot tell you how often this has happened.
The grieving mother sees a pregnant woman at the gravesite. She stands at a bowed mound, dropping white petals onto the dark brown hemisphere of mud. I cannot determine the look in her eyes from here, my knees fixed in the cold soil I have come to visit, no longer rounded. The growing bones inside her skin point to bones growing no longer in the barren womb of earth. The lonely moon endures above us. On nights like this, I question the universe and its kindness. And how like a moon her curved belly is, the other half the grave beneath her. How like the cosmos this cemetery becomes. Crisscross dirt bulbs all pregnant with bodies as cold as dead faraway planets, souvenirs of memories no one remembers. Yet, every so often, the hope of a visitor bearing fresh buds returns to mend all the major losses one by one. I watch this stranger repair our dead not with her wilted flower petals, but with the little remedy inside her. She is her own master in matter-making. The bones beneath me, too, I know, were once crafted with kindness.
To the Full Moon by Diane Porter Goff. Out howling in this burning light, every egg straining to burst its nimbus and be sucked back. Oh, this clutch of astral orbs, glimmering like serpent spawn and mistletoe. We are inchoate, the rich entelechy of our forms opening and closing to your rhythm, the light sparking from out the veg, streaking across the land like the fairy arms of succubus, awaiting exaltation, annihilation, the long sigh of giving up to press flesh with the flesh of the moon.
Persephone by Susan Gunter. They say Persephone was just hungry. Besides, she was of an age when girls don't listen to mothers. Since spring, men had been on her radar. She'd watch them in the golden fields, sowing grains or scything stalks, sweat dripping down marbled arms that flashed with their blades. This king of Hades dude had a look about him, swaggering, close-lipped, circles of fire lighting his locks. She thought she might like being touched, or touching where his loins curved into his groin. Demeter never told her about that, kept her daughter in the garden or sweeping the walk. One night, Persephone crawled in with the king. He turned to her and cut open a pomegranate, offering her half. "Eat this," he said, running his hands over her breast. She lifted out 6 seeds to swallow while he did what he wanted. It wasn't what she wanted, though, wasn't what she thought it would be. She wanted home now, her mother, the small stones that gleamed on her windowsill, her cat on her lap, the tender peas from her garden. She called to Demeter from the edge of hell. "Bring me back." "Did you eat anything?" "No, well, 6 seeds, that's all." They say Demeter allowed Persephone 6 months on earth, from planting to harvest, those golden weeks of flowers, artichokes, and wine. The rest of it was hell.
Hi, I'm Mary Crockett Hill, and I'm going to be reading Guzzle for the Restless Because. He who crosses the bridge must double-cross the troll. goat hooves on wood, beyond a green grass bowl. Dusk, America, light spittles on the gloam. Someone out of gas leans against a tarred wood pole. Bellflower for grief, its cheek like a sigh. Broth for the girl who emptied out her soul. I forgot you once. Was that enough, friend? Would you expect a hole to refill itself with hole? One person talks while the other types. You can't marry patience to regret, even so.
This is Carolyn Johnson from Houston, Texas, reading my ekphrastic poem, She is Woman, for the upcoming launch of the Artemis Journal. She is woman, wrapped in satin and lace, amid the candlelight's creamy caress. She dances with abandon to the erotic essence of her feminine creature. Her beating heart, at long last, free from the chain of abuse that now drapes loosely around her graceful nape.
Hello, this is Erika Joyner reading her contribution to the 2020 Artemis Journal, A Case of Mistaken Identity. Listening to the latest conquest about who won the pissing contest, I give an absent-minded sigh. Guess I'm just a wimpy guy. Making sure you're number one regardless of the damage done, I find that hard to sanctify. Guess I'm just a wimpy guy. Born with boy parts hanging out, my destiny, there is no doubt. To be a man, I try and try. Guess I'm just a wimpy guy. But what does fate have in store as gender forces come to fore? This guy thing might just pass me by. I might not be a wimpy guy. Those women's clothes, they swish and sway. Those vibrant colors make my day. There's more to this than meets the eye. I might not be a wimpy guy. Is what I pretend not to know, deep inside a steady glow, a patient plea for me to buy, that I am not a wimpy guy. Is what I pretend not to feel, a summons to become the real woman who arrives at why she is not a wimpy guy. I've listened to those feelings now. They've taught me much and shown me how to crawl, walk, leap and fly as woman, not that wimpy guy. Though as I embrace the other side of this supposed great divide, I very often wonder why the chasm between girl and guy.
This is Michael Lyle. I'm reading my poem Cinematic from the beautiful 2020 Artemis. Cinematic. One adult and one child, my mother always said to the ticket seller in the ornate booth. Never spoke of the sticky floor or creaking seats in the dressy dark, where words like snow covered stain and patch, clung to all things cold. And we returned to the garish street like Moses from the mountain, silent on the city bus to acclimate for the boxy dwellings on small lots, the neighbor's sputtering mower, ants working dirt outside the basement door, lilac by the back porch, purple as Caesar's cloak.
Hi, my name is Sean Prentice, and I'm going to be reading my poem on the day the great poet dies. And this is for Mary Oliver and was written on the day of her death. On the day the great poet dies. Wandering my way home through the woods this evening, I ski nearly into a striped maple branch which holds a weaved bird's nest the size of a cup of sugar. I pause mid-ski to search for eggshells, since my heart tells me that finding eggshells might teach me something about this world, this life. I find none, which is not surprising, since it is a snowy day and the nest is filled with white snow and the world is filled with whiteness. So I ski home, brain scrambled in all sorts of thoughts about work still to be done, when halfway across Solstice Lake I spy my little girl, barely 2 years old, on the other side of window pane glass, waving her arms at me like a little hurricane. If I were taught when I was younger how to cry, which I was not, I might break into tears for the swelling. I cannot help but think about the fragile eggshell quality of this life, that tattered bird's nest clinging to a scraggly striped maple, my tiny girl, barely bigger, waving at me from afar, me exposed like a winter vole on this white basin of a lake. Today, death seems to be everywhere.
Morning Find by Richard Rose. Going to nowhere faster than usual. Only a day since grackle departed, feathers as usual left on the doorstep. Gone to the where none fares any well from, still among breathers. Sweeping the carnage, I wake in plumage.
Wise Penelope. 20 years without hearth sitting, shawl weaving, sock sewing, without supervising servants, so the roast pig is pleasing to the hordes of lascivious men swigging wine, pinching servants, and waving cardboard swords. 20 years of adventures, the captain of her ship, never falling for lotus flowers or the seductive voices of sirens. No need for wax plugs in her ears. But Poseidon saw her make offerings to gray-eyed Athena and sent a tsunami to destroy her ship. Rowing home on a battered raft, her mind glowing with one-eyed giants, fierce cannibals, and sea monsters with 6 heads, knowing her husband has not woven and unwoven a shroud, knowing he is living on the lips of prostitutes and a fireside is waiting to swallow her. A dog barks on the shore, runs up and down the beach. Let the bard's words take up wings and sing away. She sails on.
Hello, Ricky Santer here with my poem Darcy Lynn in the Making. This piece now appears in my published collection of poems inspired by ventriloquism called Drop Jaw, and the poem has an epigraph which reads, "At just 12 years old, by the most votes for a final performance in the history of the show, singer ventriloquist Darcy Lynn Farmer wins NBC's America's Got Talent." Darcy Lynn in the Making. She gets her hair done at the planetarium, cures old lyrics of any sign of weariness, poses her slice of teeth like a Velcro strip of beauty pageant. She knows how to maneuver a Las Vegas stage manager and a stage mom who shepherds $1 million payload. Once upon a time, her diva bunny sister swallowed golden confetti. Now the cotton is high in Oklahoma City, and her cotton candy disposition spins merch into rainbows. She was like, "Mom and Dad, can I please have a puppet?" And they were like, "Here's your princess crown, honey." and then quarterfinals with four-eyed Oscar and his mousy palms pawing a mic for Mel B. Semifinals with Edna Lady in her 80s licking salt from Simon's cheek. Seesaw finale with Petunia and Oscar dueling at her shoulders, a little help from her friends. Behind her dressing room mirrors, Sherry Lewis smirks while Lamb Chop and Hush Puppy hum their dusty hymns. Fame now rattles Darcy's lungs, this plank-chested, lanky-legged confection of Legacy's daughter who spends her months harvesting straight aces and fever applause.
This is Diane Scribner-Clevenger, and I have the joy of reading to you my poem on page 25 of this year's Artemis Journal 2020, entitled, "And How Would It Be to Fly?" And how would it be to fly as the birds of the sea, wings unfurled into whatever wind might be, immeasurably calculated, free, not a part of them wondering, what should I do now, or can it be? As simply poised as a drop of water raised to fall back into its source, just so, these birds know how to sail without hoisting, their wings never listing nor luffing. Even keeled they soar just above the wave, every wave, now below the horizon, now above, floating in the air like love. And how would it be to fly as the birds of the sea, wings unfurled into whatever wind might be, as they fly above, grounded, astounded, me.
Veils. We've reached the other world. Wisps of cloud hang like shawls over the mountains. Leaves turn red. Where the bridge hangs, rust grows out from rock, burgeoning. There is no place left for God. All day the peaks rose and fell until, at night, we found a bar where those who tend snow gather to tell stories. In one, a boy who was our son careened into an abyss of ice. In another, the girl who was our daughter fell and rode beneath her horse, dragged by a rope. It's all the same weather, smoke or mist, a swath cut in tall grass where deer wander towards berries, the purdah of Vishnu. Please don't forget to honor our dead, to arm your sadness with a lotus flower, a conch, a mace, a discus. The cover-ups, a fait accompli. Children are always involved. Children and secrets, envelopes and whiteness.
Hilda was too tall for a washable frock. Her mother wished dresses could fit her the way they did other girls. Toweringly embarrassed in Wanamaker's, Bonwit tellers, she was savage on the basketball court. Nothing fit her but Ezra, turret of classics, torrent of words, who would climb the lofty maple in her parents' garden. Another's beating heart, another's breath, clang of the trolley beyond the hedges. They stretched out in the crow's nest her brother had built. How he ached to kiss her, how she ached. He frightened her every time he caught the last possible trolley, wildly swaying, nearly falling, waving, shouting, "I'll pick up my hat, the books, next time." E.P. in the Garden, a poem by Ron Smith. Up the big maple, into my brother's crow's nest, the house hidden by leafy branches. Beyond the hedge, occasional cart, carriage. Every half hour, a rattling tram jolting past. He must not miss the last car, the train to Winecoat. There's another in half an hour. Ah, Dryad, he says. We sway with the wind, with the clouds. Finally, we slip through the branches, leap together to the ground, the solid ground. No, I say, no. Drawing back, a girl of my time and place. I'll run ahead and stop the trolley. Quick, get your books, whatever you left in the hall. I'll get them next time, he says. Run, I say, run. He just catches it, nearly falling, the trolley swaying. Now I face them in the house. Father winding the clock, mother saying, Where were you? Didn't you hear me calling? Where is Ezra Pound? Gone. Books? Hat? He'll get them next time.
Hello, this is Anne Kate Sullivan, author, poet, podcaster, publisher, author. And today I would really like to read a poem to you that appears in the new Artemis Journal. It's called Finding My Voice, and it seems to me that in this time of shift and change, that understanding our unique expression, our own voice, our own creativity is more important than ever. And really trusting in what it is that wants to sing through each of us. So it goes like this. Finding my voice. I wish to free all that waits within me to be born. May my limitations be washed away by a silent river. May I find my true voice once again. I sense that where I am closed and tight, I am yet untrue. I want to unfurl, so that no blossom within me is fruitless or withered, and no song is left unsung. I sense colors around me. I dance, finding freedom as a woman, moving now in the ebbing and flowing currents of existence. Then I open my mouth to sing, but pause. I feel ashamed for an instant. Who am I to have such a great longing? Yet I want to know my own life and how to move within it. I wish to be a bard, finding my true voice. As if by magic, the green wind blows from the west. I sense my ancestors, the women who came before me, and they are all singing. Leaning back into the wings of those who love me, I hum with them, finding my voice. Then I sing with all women, remembering the words that have been left unsaid. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Artemis Journal and to all the incredible women who have been so brave to share their voices over the years. Many blessings.
Thank you so much for joining us. Copies of Artemis are available at the shop and on the Artemis website at artemisjournal.org. Jeanne Larsen's book, What Penelope Chooses, is available now at Book No Further or wherever books are sold. Please join us at the museum to see the exhibitions Celestial Centennial, The Art and Legacy of Dorothy Gillespie, on view through September 13th, and Dorothy Gillespie, Still Enchanting Virginia's Blue Ridge, on view through November 8th. The museum is currently operating on limited hours from Friday through Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, 12 to 5. General admission is free thanks to AEP Foundation. We hope to see you soon.